It's time. So I've discussed a bunch of theories about the Madoka Magica witches. I've talked about the witches we know of, and theorized what kind of magical girl they used to be. I've also theorized which of the girls from Magia Record might have become the different witches we know. And then they made a bunch more witches. But you know what? I'm a little tired of theorizing when it comes to all of these witches and characters. I want to instead take a moment to explain all of the details of the witches we do have confirmed magical girls for. The unique designs that change from witch to witch was such a fun aspect of the show. You can glean so much insight on the different girls just by looking at the designs of their inevitable witches, from their inspirations to their abilities and even just the type of animation style. Hell, that's how I was even able to churn out 3 whole theory videos on this topic. So what if we take the time to appreciate the witches we know have confirmed magical girls, to dissect all of the intricate details of their designs. We have more and more girls getting confirmed doppels in Magia Record, so that means there's more and more we can discuss. But to start things off, let's take a look at our Holy Quintet and their witches and doppels.
I was stupid. So stupid.
Of course, it only feels natural to start with Sayaka and her witch, Octavia. Sayaka's transformation was really the first time we, as Madoka fans, realized witches came from magical girls. And there's a lot that goes into the details of Sayaka and Octavia. Fun fact, in every single timeline, Sayaka becomes a magical girl, she turns into Octavia. It's seemingly an unavoidable event. I guess that wasn't exactly that much fun of a fact. So before we dive into Octavia, let's take a second to look at Sayaka's magical girl design. The first things that should pop out to you is the word knight. She is the pinnacle of a white knight, complete with armor and cape. This makes sense. Sayaka was very hung up on trying to make a wish that was for the good of someone else. After Mami's warning about using wishes wisely and not for selfish reasons, Sayaka basically had to convince herself she was making the wish out of good intentions. She was telling herself she was saving Kyosuke, she was his hero, he got to play his violin again, he got to be happy again. She's doing it for a righteous cause. Though deep down, we all know that isn't wholly true. Though, on a related note, the name Sayaka means bright, so her white knight aesthetic might be referencing her bright name. Anyways, taking a closer look at her outfit, there's a lot of cute details we can see. Specifically, her hair clip changes from the typical accessories girls wear to this swirly pattern. This looks like the musical note fortissimo, which means very loud. A fitting concept for the boisterous go-getter Sayaka is. Now, the theme of music is a long-running concept throughout her and Octavia's designs. Now, we don't see Sayaka playing any musical instruments herself, but her connection to Kyosuke and musical concerts clearly play major roles in Sayaka's life, being something she's been attached to since she was a little kid. More importantly, though, her wish to heal Kyosuke's arm was mostly to help him play his music again, so the musical theme is woven through her design. Because seemingly, when you make a wish with Kyubei, your magical powers are stemmed from what your wish was. Though I have some theories about that idea that we'll cover later in this video. For now, let's just assume that the girls' wish directly translates to your design and your magical abilities. Sayaka made a healing wish, so her magical ability is to heal herself, accompanied by a design that looks like a musical score. Sayaka's soul gem is located on her stomach, right where her belly button would be. At first, the significance of this placement for her soul gem seems obtuse at best. Singing usually involves deep breathing, but Sayaka isn't a singer. I did find it interesting when Kyubei shows Sayaka her soul gem is where her pain is, it's her stomach she holds. So maybe that's where her pain is tied to when she's a magical girl. By doing some digging though, I did end up finding about chakras. Any fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender might have an idea on what I'm talking about. But basically, different parts of your body give out different energies and can affect you in different ways. Now, the chakra that rests in your solar plexus relates to self-esteem. A chakra that's in balance will give someone confidence and a sense of purpose. Very much to how Sayaka felt when she first became a magical girl. However, once out of balance, it can lead to low self-esteem and control issues, which pretty well describes Sayaka's descent into becoming a witch. This chakra is represented with the color yellow and uses the element of fire, so it might not have been entirely intentional for Sayaka to be based around this concept, but it's neat note that there's still some connections between these ideas. Her soul gem is shaped like a C, which is a musical note seen in Gregorian chanting. It's the do note, like doe, a deer. I couldn't find any significance with that though, maybe it was just an interesting shape to go with for someone's soul gem. Though alternatively, I see people theorize it's meant to also symbolize a mermaid's tail. The idea of the mermaid aesthetic gets played directly into Octavia's design, since she herself is also a mermaid. Her tail can be a little hard to see in most shots of the anime, so I wouldn't blame you if you missed that detail. Octavia carries out the strong theme of music, and mermaids themselves are often associated with music, though it might be closer to a siren. Sirens use music to lure victims under the guise of seducing them. Sirens can take many forms, including being similar to a mermaid. Mermaids in general also represent lost love, not too dissimilar to how Sayaka lost Kyosuke to Hitomi. While we're on them, some of Octavia's familiars bear a striking resemblance to both Kyosuke and Hitomi. Octavia's labyrinth is filled with stringed instruments, essentially trying to surround herself with the person she never got to be with, desperately trying to be the center of his attention. The dancers that resemble Hitomi are said to only exist to dance cheerfully behind the witch. An odd choice at first, but I think these familiars are meant to represent what Sayaka wished Hitomi had acted like when it came to Kyosuke. Rather than taking the lead and asking out Kyosuke, she would instead have been supporting Sayaka and encouraging her to get the courage to ask him out herself. So, since we talked about some interesting facts with Sayaka's name, let's look at some interesting info with Octavia's name. Full name, Octavia von Seckendorf. Now there's a German poet named Karl Sigmund von Seckendorf who would compose music for his poems. Music again. One of his poems was The Sorrow of Young Werther, which depicted a man who was driven to suicide because of unrequited love, which is not too dissimilar to Sayaka's situation. Now let's actually look at Octavia's design itself. It's basically taken the key aspects of Sayaka's magical girl outfit and increased the concept of them. The armor is now full plate armor, helmet included, and her cape is now adorned with a huge popped collar with musical notes on the back, billowing like water itself. One aspect of her design I find intriguing is the large red ribbon on her collar. There's actually a surprising amount of reds seen in Octavia that was absent from Sayaka's design. Now I believe these ribbons are meant to reference Madoka and/or Kyoko, a strangled reminder of the girls she betrayed in her descent to despair. A fun thing is Octavia uses a cutlass to conduct her orchestra, something we later see Sayaka doing in the Rebellion movie as well. The one aspect to Octavia I couldn't understand was the odd rainbow pattern in her fin. However, this sort of pattern is often seen with other witches and familiars as well. Charlotte's eye colors is an immediate example that comes to mind. Finally, taking a look at Sayaka's doppel, it's pretty clearly a one-to-one with Octavia's regular design, only instead of the helmet, there's a place for Sayaka to stand and control the body. I was confused by these flags until I realized we can also see them in Octavia's throne, but if there's any further significance to these designs, I couldn't figure it out. Anyways, I think that covers our broken-hearted mermaid. Let's move on to her counterpart, Kyoko and Ophelia.
Game over!
Let's start with soul gem facts again. Kyoko's soul gem is meant to be shaped like an eye. Specifically, it seems to be used as a symbol for her dad's church? Not a cult, she specifically calls it a church, which is fitting since her wish was for everyone to listen to what her papa had to say, which made his church become super popular, bringing the family out of extreme poverty and supposedly homelessness. This unfortunate living situation is why Kyoko has such a habit of eating, and gets so mad at Sayaka for wasting food. When you have nothing to eat, every bit of food is precious. Kyoko's soul gem is placed right on her chest, honestly in a very similar spot as Madoka's soul gem. If you're curious about chakras again, well, let me tell you. The heart chakra, when in balance, gives love and compassion, and when unbalanced is hatred, selfishness, jealousy, fear, or betrayal. An unbalanced chakra definitely seems to describe Kyoko's current lifestyle as a runaway, though once again it might all be coincidence since its color is green and its element is air, which are both kind of missing with Kyoko. Kyoko's name can be translated translated as apricot, which apparently is a symbol of strength achieved through struggle. Think of that the next time you're eating an apricot. So Kyoko's outfit doesn't seem to have any significant themes with it. It's mildly reminiscent of some church clothes, but it mostly seems designed for style. Hey, not everything is going to have a bunch of little significant details in it all the time. Now let's talk about Kyoko's magic, because it's a bit of an oddity. If you've seen the show, you know all about her red chains, used to block people or attacks in or out during combat, but that doesn't really fit the idea of wishes being tied to a character's magic ability, huh? Remember, Kyoko's wish was for people to listen to her father, to believe his cause. How do chains relate to that? Well, have you ever read A Different Story? It's one of the Madoka Magica spin-off mangas, this one depicting Kyoko and Mami teaming up before the events of the show take place. In this manga, Kyoko's ability is actually illusions, being capable of making it look like there's duplicates of herself. Illusions and misdirection would fit the idea of her father's church a lot better. And this concept of duplicate illusions even gets seen with the witch in the portable game. Speaking of, let's talk about Ophelia. Ophelia is called the Wudon Witch. Now, Wudon is a type of female role for Chinese opera, specifically one that uses a lot of weapons. Kyoko's spear is very versatile, and could be seen as multiple types of weapons, and the opera theme seems to be referencing her dad's church again, commenting on the performative nature of it. A note on the witch says, quote, "Can't remember what the horse that always accompanies her was." It's also stated that the horse isn't actually a part of the witch is just riding atop of it. This had me pretty stumped for a while, until I found out that in Japan, horse meat is called Sakura, and Kyoko's last name is also Sakura. Basically, what this all means is Ophelia can't remember the family that she had lost so long ago, and can't remember their significance, yet still tries to keep them around. Ophelia's candle head might be referencing her dad again, as there are several candles surrounding him during her sermons in her flashback. Though, on top of that, I think it's also meant to symbolize how Kyoko is a bit of a hothead. I like that idea more than the dad thing, because honestly, a lot of her designs is based on her dad's church. Both Kyoko and Sayaka's designs feel entirely hung up on one aspect of their character, and I kinda wish there was more to them to draw from, rather than just music and church over and over again. Back to the candle thing, there is another significance with her witch being a flame. During Kyoko's flashback, when her family died, their heads were engulfed in flames. This might just be Kyoko's way of symbolizing the dead, but it's also said in one of the timelines that Kyoko's dad killed the family by burning his church down. And witches being burned at the stake was a common practice by the church during the witch hunts. So all these concepts might all come together to be the reason for Ophelia's candle head. Finally, taking a look at Ophelia's labyrinth, we can see several fish floating around. In fact, it actually looks like the whole labyrinth is underwater. There's two possible reasons for this. First, fish are a common symbol for Christianity. You know, that one fish-looking thing, right? Yeah. Well, on top of that, it could be used to tie Ophelia with Octavia. The two girls had a lot in common, and had a deep bond and are often seen as a pair with each other. But on top of that, the character Ophelia in Shakespeare died due to drowning, so this underwater theme might also be referencing a potential namesake, though in general the name Ophelia also means help. Whether that's asking for help or trying to help others, both of these concepts seem to fit Kyoko. Lastly, Kyoko's doppel. It actually seems pretty different from Ophelia's regular design. The flame is depicted as an ornate headpiece rather than actual flames, and rather than being an actual candle, the doppel is just a candlestick holder with a robe floating behind it. The holder still has those horse legs though from before, but interestingly, the head has been replaced with a little pink knot. Now you might initially think this is meant to symbolize Madoka in some way, but actually, it looks like this is more meant to represent Kyoko's little sister, who, once we get a better look at her from these behind-the-scenes pictures, has hair that almost perfectly matches this aspect of her doppel. Now that's it for her. Onto Mami and Candelaro. Mami made a wish to save her life after a car crash. In turn, she has the magical ability to make ribbons. Now there's a couple of different ways to interpret Mami's ribbons. My immediate thought is that they represent the strings of life. If you've watched Hercules, you're familiar with this concept. Basically, it was believed everyone had a string that represents their life, and if you died, it got cut. Mami has been given ribbons to represent how her string didn't get cut. On top of that, though, there's also the story of the Buddha and the spider's thread. There's a story of a man who went to hell, and a Buddha offers him a spider's thread to climb up back to paradise, to reward him for his one act of kindness. While he's climbing up, however, others in hell try to climb up after him. He pushes them back down, claiming this thread is only meant for him, and in that act of selfishness being made, the Buddha cut the thread and they all went back down into hell. While more concerned with hell and paradise rather than life and death, I think this concept is also a good representation for Mami's ribbons. After all, Mami only died because she was blinded by her selfishness for wanting Madoka to become a magical girl with her. Mami uses rifles to fight, that mixed with her blonde hair and her iconic finisher move. I think it's safe to say Mami might be of European descent, or at least very inspired by Europe. Rifles are often associated with Europe, especially for various sports, which is also seemingly reflected in her magical girl outfit. With the sleeves, boots, and hat, it's pretty clear her look is based off of a Western rifleman attire. Mami's ribbons seem reflected in her design as well. There's a lot of stripes that feel similar to her ribbons, and on top of that, even her curled pigtails look like they could be made out of her ribbons too. It's a cute little touch. It's a good way to bring it all together. Now, Mami's name is clearly meant to reference Mami, like a mother. Mami is the oldest of the initial group, and acts very much like a mother-type figure would. This becomes much more apparent when she's paired with Bebe, whose name is meant to sound like baby. Finally, onto her soul gem. Mami's soul gem is a flower, and flowers are actually a running theme with the rest of her designs, especially in Candelaro. Though it doesn't seem like it's meant to be referencing any specific flower. More, I think it's supposed to hint at Mami's love for tea. There are plenty of teas that get made out of different types of flowers, and a flower is just generally more cute and aesthetically pleasing than herbs. Mami's soul gem is located on her head, much like a hair accessory. Now, I did bother looking up the chakra associated with the head, and honestly, none of it applies to Mami, because more importantly, and probably more obviously, it's on Mami's head because she gets decapitated. Which leads us to Candelaro. Fun fact, Candelaro is technically a masculine name. The female version would be Candelara. Anyways, Candelaro doesn't technically have a head. If you look closely, you can see it does have the body shape a girl would have, but the head is missing, because, you know. Instead, there's this flower-like bonnet in its place, the bonnet's strings seemingly being very reminiscent of Mami's ribbons. Now, Candelaro really leans in hard with the flower and tea themes Mami had. Its bonnet with its upper torso look an awful lot like either a pansy or an orchid. Well, I looked both up, and pansies are often used to symbolize love, positive energy, and happiness. Not too dissimilar to how Mami felt before she died. Similarly, yellow orchids symbolize joy, friendship, and new beginnings. Either way, they seem like a perfect fit for Mami. The tea bag on the back of Candelaro reads Candelaro du Polignac. I hope I said that right. I'm bad with French. Which is apparently the witch's full name, although the familiars are also called du Polignacs, so it might just be referencing Mami and her familiars together. Now, there was a Duchess de Polignac who was a member of Marie Antoinette's court, and if you know Marie Antoinette, you know she met a similar fate as Mami. Though there is also a pagan holiday called Candlemas. Common superstitions with the holiday are about death and serpents, and it might feel like a stretch, but Charlotte is rather serpentine. While we're on her familiars, there's technically designs for all of Mami's friends, including 2 different versions of Homura, one with and one without glasses, it seems. And Candelaro is so small, it fits inside of a teacup. and the familiars carry her around with them. This might be some insight on Mami's real thoughts, that she felt small and weak and wanted to rely on the other girls. Finally, looking at her doppel, it's just Mami wearing the bonnet we see Candelaro has, and she's adorable. Though from this perspective, the flower aspect on the bonnet also kind of looks a bit like a tulip, which also symbolizes happiness and hope. So I finally just looked up what all yellow flowers tend to symbolize, and the consensus is joy. That's all I got for our tea queen. Let's move on to Madoka.
I really want this. It's the answer I've been looking for. I swear.
Okay, so now, I want to bring back what I was saying before about Kyubey and the girls' magic. So far, for every other girl, it seems like their magical ability is directly tied to the wish they made. The only exception is Madoka, because in every timeline, Madoka makes a different wish, but she still always gets the same powers and abilities. In the first timeline, she wished to save a cat that had just died in front of her. Fun fact, it's probably this shot from the opening showing us that. Cool. In one of the timelines, she wished to save Homura from Walpurgis Nacht. That timeline was probably the one where we first see Madoka's witch form emerge. In the different story, she wished to save Sayaka. The only through line I can see throughout all these wishes was that she wanted to save someone's life. So that might be why her magic is always the same, though there are some theories out there that Kyubey can manipulate what powers you get, and Kyubey is purposefully giving Madoka the same powers over and over and over again in order to continue building her strength in the repeated timelines. Anyways, you might be wondering what Madoka's magical ability even is. Well, it's her arrows she shoots from her bow. Technically, that is her magical power, which, you know, I would have been pretty pissed if it was me. I become a magical girl and then I'm handed a stick and get told to figure it out on my own. That's some bullshit. So, wishes to save others' lives would also explain why Madoka's soul gem is in the shape of a teardrop, crying over the loss of a loved one or crying over saving their life. Madoka's soul gem is at the base of her neck, like I said, similar to Kyoko, and all of those positive traits for that chakra does describe Madoka pretty well. More importantly though, I think it's meant to be a symbol for Madoka bearing it all. Basically, Madoka wears her heart on her sleeve of sorts, and she's not hiding any part of who she is. Funny enough, she actually keeps her soul gem and it stays in that same spot when she becomes Madokami. Madoka's first name means circle, and could be referencing several different things. The circle of life, a representation of the world, or the concept of being infinite or repeated, which all could be referencing Madoka's life and death being a key aspect of the story, or the fact that she rewrites the world after becoming a god, or the infinite or repeated timelines caused by Madoka's influence on Homura. On top of circle, there are a couple of other translations for Madoka's name. It could also be translated to wish, which is fitting how important her wishes end up being. A shooting star is even seen on her grief seed, a symbol for making wishes. But Madoka can also mean flower, and there are some prominent flower aspects in Madoka's design. Now, we all know Madoka designed her magical girl costume herself, based on her sketch for it, and it's abundantly clear Madoka's main goal was to look cute above all else. Lots of frills and ribbons, there's even a little heart cut out in her back. Aww. Fun fact, I learned through a 100 questionnaire that Madoka used to be in the Arts and Crafts Club and in the Garden Club. Interesting that the artistic girl who was in a club for arts and crafts just so happens to fight monsters that look like they're made out of arts and crafts. Interesting. But of course, with her garden club interests, it makes sense that roses would end up being the other biggest aspect to Madoka's magical girl design. The bell of Madoka's skirt looks eerily reminiscent to that of a rose being held upside down, especially when we see it from the top. Roses are repeated in her design, being seen on the top of her bow, which looks like it's just a big long branch off of a rose bush. Roses are often considered frail, but their thorns are biting and sharp. This could be referencing how timid Madoka initially appears, but how stern and serious she gets when it comes to protecting others. Now, you might initially think roses symbolize romance, but that's usually only the red ones. Madoka is very clearly wielding a pink rose, which actually symbolizes femininity, admiration, and gratitude, all of which seem like a perfect description for Madoka to me. I'm gonna shake things up and talk about her doppel first before I get into her witch, because Madoka's doppel in Magia Record might look pretty different to you if you know what Gretchen looks like. Instead, this looks like it's taking more inspiration from that gaseous form we see coming out of Madoka's soul gem when it first hatches. But it also takes heavy inspiration from the way Gretchen looks in Magia Portable. It's said to be the center of the witch, implying the mountainous form we usually see might just be an extension to this piece. I find it pretty interesting that this is the only witch who seemingly keeps what looks like their soul gem intact in their design. Interesting. I think maybe what this means is that technically the witch isn't even fully hatched yet, that there's still potential for the witch to become even stronger due to the potential of infinite timelines. So really, Gretchen could actually be way more powerful than we all had initially expected. And now's a good time to finally talk about Gretchen herself too. I've discussed aspects of her before in my very first Madoka video, but to briefly cover what I've already said, she's meant to look like the bottom of an hourglass, as a pair with Walpurgisnacht, who is the top of the hourglass. Whether it's to represent Homura's whole conflict with repeated time, or to symbolize how these two together spell out the apocalypse, or the end of time. She seems to have some sort of humanoid top to her form, and we can never really quite get a good look at it, which is meant to be part of the point. Her power is so insurmountable that we can't even comprehend what she is. Looking at the bottom part of her design though, there is a bit more clarity with what we can see here. The way it bells out is awfully reminiscent of how Madoka's skirt bells out in her magical girl form. Also, the way it does this, okay, it's unclear if these lines are meant to represent legs or something. More importantly, I think it's meant to represent different timelines. You know, like a leg for every repeated timeline. Now, Madoka actually gets another design for her magical girl outfit and her witch, because in the latest timeline, Madoka wished to erase all witches from across time before they could have been born, and that wish combined with her limitless power created Madokami, or her god form. Honestly, her god form isn't really much to talk about. It mostly seems to be referencing Usagi's princess dress and hairstyle to some degree. One last thing for Madokami, her eyes have become gold here, and this is interestingly one of the only 2 times a magical girl in the series proper has eyes that are different colors from her hair. At the end of the movie Rebellion, when she re-enters the mortal world, she's now wearing yellow ribbons in her hair, essentially matching her now gold-eyed god form, and also acting as visual shorthand to tell us that this is the Madoka that was once a god. Pre-god Madoka and post-god Madoka. Gretchen also changes a lot during this time too, though we could speculate this is just the top part we never actually got to see, only now it's literally gotten so big it's impossible not to see it. Her mouth looks like the moon and her eye looks like the earth, symbolizing how the fabric of reality is being affected by this creature, attempting to swallow up reality as a whole before Madokami's wish could kill it off. And finally, it's time. Oh, did you think Madoka was a special snowflake for having multiple witch forms? Well, here we go. Homura and Homulilly.
When did I become a witch?
2 different magical girl outfits, 2 different doppels, 3 different witch forms. I suppose it makes sense that the character who's constantly altering time would have her appearance changing constantly with her. But here we go. Fun fact, she's the only character who I had to write more than 1 page of notes for. Okay, so Homura herself. Her soul gem is on her left hand and it's in a diamond shape. The only significance I could find for the diamond shape is after Madokami rewrites the world, the little things they get from the wraiths come in the shape of little cubes, and in the right angle, a cube can become a diamond. I tried to see if there was a theme of card suits between the girls. Madoka has a heart, Mami's flower looks a bit like a club. Unfortunately, neither Kyoko or Sayaka have really prominent spade shapes in their designs, at least nothing I spotted. Interestingly, the diamond designs down Homura's legs seem to be reminiscent of a chain, so maybe it's a symbol for being linked together. She does hold Madoka's hand an awful lot, and they clearly have a deep bond, so her soul gem might be referring to her magic being linked to Madoka's safety. On top of that, the significance of it being on her left hand first felt odd, because we can blatantly see she writes with her right hand, and uses her right hand when she's using her guns, so she obviously seems to be right-handed. However, when her magical weapon becomes a bow in the new world, she actually seems to adopt Madoka's powers of creating arrows, and it comes from her left hand being drawn back from the bow. She seems to get this weapon and this power due to her deep connection with the world's new god, even getting the power to alter people's memories, referencing how she is the only one who remembers life before Madoka rewrote it. In the original timeline, though, Homura made a wish to go back and help protect Madoka. This is why she got a shield as her weapon for protection. And on top of that, she also got her time-controlling powers. Specifically, she can pause time around her momentarily, and when the sand timer runs out, time resets itself to just before she transferred to Mitakihara. So remember what I said about the girls' hair and eyes matching? The other exception is Homura, having black hair and purple eyes, which right off the bat makes her feel like some sort of other compared to the rest of the girls, hinting at her future significance with the story and characters. But there's also the significance of her colors themselves, because we can see across all of the girls that at some point in time, whether it's their magical girl outfit or their witch form, that the girls have reds or blacks in their designs. Even Homura, donning her red glasses and the red ribbon from Madoka. These reds are referencing Madoka's red ribbons, and the blacks are referencing Homura's black hair. However, only Homura and Homulilly have any purple in them. She is the only character with purple in her designs, and none of the other witches have any purple either. The only exception is Madoka's mother. Junko's design feels awfully similar to Homura, wearing lots of purples and blacks in her outfit. It's interesting to note that Madoka greatly respects her mother, and in that 100 questionnaire, she said she would want to marry someone who's cool like her mother. So maybe there's supposed to be a reference here. Moving back to Homura, her name means flame, something Madoka even mentions in the show. The flame part might feel a bit obtuse, and like it was just picked because it does sound cool. However, I think it's important to point out that Madoka's weapon is often seen with a pink flame on top of it, linking the two girls together. However, Homura's full name technically means heart on fire, which seems like it's more likely referencing Homura's love for Madoka. Looking at Homura's design, she seems to be mostly based off of traditional Catholic clothing. Homura even transferred from a Christian Catholic school in Tokyo, so maybe religion is a bigger aspect for Homura than she might initially seem. Finally, let's move on to her first form for her witch, Homulilly. So Homura's witch form changes between its version seen in the Madoka portable game and what we see in the movie Rebellion. So let's start with the portable version of Homulilly. She's called the Mortal World Witch, whose nature is closed circuits. The closed circuits thing seems to be referencing her time travel stuff, but specifically the symbol for infinity is seen in Homulilly's hair here. So rather than being about her time travel itself, it might be about how her time travel has been broken. By becoming a witch, she's stuck in this form for the rest of her life, closing the circuit. So this version of Homulilly is really hard to get a good look at. This is really the only look we ever get of her. I do like how her face has been obscured, similar to Gretchen's face. While we're on her though, let's look at Homura's doppels, because they take direct inspiration from this version of Homulilly. One part I love is that with all of these looks, her hat is a record player. The brim of the hat is a record, and the top part is the arm for the needle. And it looks like a traditional witch's hat, and I love that. This is likely referencing the idea of a broken record, Homura repeating herself time and time again. Her doppels also show her wearing a dead Kyubey on her hat, like how you would see with old furred coats and stuff that would keep the head of the animal attached to it. Which, let's be honest, that was weird of us, right? That was an awfully macabre thing for our fashionistas to do, right? It's no secret Homura hates Kyubey, constantly trying to kill this creature whenever she can. Wearing his corpse as a decoration not only fits this idea of her hate, but also it's just a reminder that no matter what she does, he's always still there. Even after death and turned into a witch, you can't get rid of this awful incubator. In both designs for her doppels, her hair ties together, creating infinite sand, pairing with the rest of her body as her lower half has seemingly turned into an hourglass. Both doppels also have large ribbon-like hands on their back of her, utilizing the ribbons from the bow she wears on the back of her dress. But it's also something we see carrying on to the rebellion version of Homulilly, which is neat. Glasses Homura is holding the needle for her record, using it as a weapon, but regular Homura has a lot more going on. Her dress is much more longer and ornate, potentially showing how this form of her is much stronger than her weak original timeline self. But she also has several attachments that represent her glasses version of herself. These likely are meant to reference each timeline she's lived through so far. They're all wielding pins though, and I'm unsure what exactly this is supposed to be about. This could just be a stylized version of the needle for her record, but they also kind of look like knitting needles though. And if we look really close at Homulilly, it almost looks like there's two red knitting needles stitching her hair together. The speculative reason for this is that it's referencing the saying, "A stitch in time saves 9", basically using this saying to reference how Homura is using her time powers to try to save Madoka. That feels like a bit of a stretch to me though. Now then, let's tackle the Homulilly we see in the movie Rebellion. This version is the Nutcracker Witch, with a self-sufficient nature. So, Nutcracker, let's talk about that. The Nutcracker thing has some references throughout the movie. There's lots of teeth imagery, even some of her familiars are teeth. And then she has some other familiars that seem entirely based off of the classic Nutcracker as the British soldier. But like, that's also sort of obscure for Homura, huh? Well, we do see Homura shattering her soul gem in her teeth. Not dissimilar to how a nutcracker would work. There also seems to be a theme of consumption here and there too, but that also feels sort of vague at best. There is a part of the Bible that talks about sinners gnashing their teeth in hell, maybe acting as a prelude to how Homura becomes a devil. There's also this fact that in the ballet of the Nutcracker, it depicts a broken nutcracker who befriended a girl who takes care of him and mends him. And then, in turn, later in the story, the Nutcracker had to turn around and help defend the girl, maybe referencing how Madoka and Homura continually try helping each other. But I think the easiest answer for this is Homura's gone crazy. Clearly, this is not the actions of a girl who's sound of mind. She's a nut. She's gone nutty. I don't know, that's how I always saw it. Let's look at her actual design itself. Starting with her first form, it keeps her same record-styled hat from before, and her outfit is really just the same exact thing she's wearing as a regular magical girl. The bottom of the skirt, however, looks a bit like the curtains we would pull back for a play. There's plenty of theater-like imagery throughout the whole series. This curtain theme continues into her second form as well. This look opens up a little bit and reveals her skeletal body on the inside. Homulilly in general is meant to represent death incarnate. Her whole labyrinth is meant to be a funeral procession for her. In fact, with the bright colors and the designs of the frills of her dress and her skeletal look, she feels awfully reminiscent of the celebrations for the Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, which is often meant to celebrate the dead, joyful remembrance rather than sad mourning. Homulilly was supposed to be Homura's swan song. She was proudly trying to make her witch form last to get back at Kyubei, so it would make sense why she would see this as a celebration rather than something to be sad over. At a glance, I'm sure most of you have noticed that Homura has all of the girls' colors in her design. Red, blue, yellow, even a tiny little bow on the front of her dress, which seems reminiscent of Madoka's ribbons. Now then, that flower sprouting from her head is awfully prominent, huh? Well, let's take a closer look at it. This is a red spider lily. These plants typically get planted onto graves and is often associated with death itself. This is because these are one of the few flowers that bloom in the fall. So while the other plants are dying, or more accurately going dormant, these flowers are thriving, not only making them associated with death, but with reincarnation as well. Fitting for the dead girl who stole a second chance of living. But on top of that, red spider lilies also symbolize the eternal separation of friends and lovers. Last but not least, we can discuss Homura's final form, Devil Homura. So, Homura was initially hospitalized because of a heart condition, and after becoming a magical girl, she started using her magic to heal her heart and her vision vision, so she didn't need to wear her glasses either. I bring it up because there seems to be a bit of a heart theme in her devil outfit. The top part of it looks reminiscent of a broken heart, maybe referencing her prior condition that led to her meeting Madoka, since Madoka was the nurse's aide for the class. But it could also be about how Homura felt brokenhearted after losing Madoka when she became a god. I think it's important to note that Devil Homura is really missing the opulence of God Madoka. It's just a sort of long dress, seemingly decorated with raven feathers. Ravens are often associated with bad omens, and this form of Homura seems like one of those. We also see ravens represented in one of her familiars as well. The symbol on her chest seems to be like a pitchfork, likely referencing how she's a devil now, who are usually seen wielding pitchforks. Her new soul gem, for lack of a better term for this object, is also entirely unique to her. It looks like a little crown, likely symbolizing her newfound power now that she's a god-witch hybrid. Lastly, at least in some shots, it seems like her eyes have brightened up a little bit, seemingly adding tiny amounts of pink to her highlights now, probably referencing how this was power stolen from Madoka. And that's it. I've done it, finally. I've discussed not only the design aspects behind Homulilly, but the entirety of the Holy Quintet. Yes! But of course, this is only the beginning, because there are other witches with confirmed magical girls, and all of those Magia record characters have doppels as well. So it looks like I still have a long way to go when it comes to the designs for Madoka Magica. Thank you so much for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Shout out to my $10 patrons, you're all amazing. Nako, James Dodds, Cool Duck, Andrew, Ramiel, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, G Extreme, Classy Critic, Surge, Mordred Pendragon, Boulder Off Bros, Sunny Shy, Great Bar, Caleb Grimm, Pentamenta, Genital War Thunder, Carmen, Jake, Storm, Amber, Lawleth, Livid Aries, Mad Frost, Just a Chap in a Top Hat, Hype Man, Luno the Evoker, and Zero to Hero. So yeah, I hope you liked this. This was a big one. This was a big ol' video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a nice, safe, happy Halloween. Let me know any and all thoughts you have in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.